Hello and welcome to this Monday edition of FreightWaves Now. I'm your host and lead economist Anthony Smith, and today I'll be giving a shipper econ update. But first, we're going to go to Michael Vincent with a carrier update brought to you by PowerFleet. Stay tuned.
Good morning, I'm Michael Vincent. Welcome to your carrier update brought to you by PowerFleet. Let's jump into it for the week. Outbound tender volumes, you can see here in blue for this year against 2019 in orange and 2018 in green. You can see they're still quite elevated. I've pulled this out for the full year so you can see the normal seasonal trends over the last 2 years. So we're expecting this to continue to fluctuate and some upward pressure moving forward on capacity as the holiday season gets into full swing here. Let's move forward. City outbound tender volumes. Well, these are the outbound tender volumes by the lengths of haul. And you can see in green is the long haul, slight downtick, but still quite elevated and obviously leading the way. Tweener and medium in the orange and purple, slight tick up. And you see the short haul and city in yellow and blue respectively. In the bottom, a little bit weaker, a little bit trend down, but those will jump up as we've talked before as the long haul moves up, getting those goods across country to those markets. The shorter hauls start to come up, and we expect that to continue to be the case. Moving forward, outbound tender rejects by mode. Outbound tender rejects for all modes sticking pretty close to the van rate as it normally does, around 25%. So 1 in 4 loads still being rejected. High upward pressure on rates as well, or sustaining the rates that we already have that are elevated. You see van at 25.3, refrigerated at 44.05, and your flatbed in yellow at the bottom. Uptick over the last week, but still at 10.64. A little bit of a rise throughout since August, but not a major fluctuation there. As we move forward to outbound length of haul, or Aloha for you sonar users, we see that there's still continuing pressure or upward pressure on the lengthening of the average length of haul in the United States as the speed to market and replenishing those warehouses is still underway. Moving forward here to our outbound tender volume, outbound tender reject and outbound tender volume 3D map here. In the color is your outbound tender rejects. The height of the market is your volumes. You can see the center of the country here, Missouri, Arkansas, Kansas, St. Louis, Memphis area, really strong in the outbound tender rejects, upward movement in the tender rejects there, as well as in Denver. And you've got your El Paso market here, the cross-border outbound tender rejections quite elevated. And over here in your Idaho and Oregon area, you also have quite high tender rejects as you see the Pacific Northwest really starting to come online here with some heat in volumes. As you can see, those markets are raised quite a bit. In the Great Lakes and the eastern center of the country, volumes continue to be very, very high, although volatility in those markets as far as the change in the outbound tender rejects seems to be a little bit stable right now, as it seems to be kind of a new normal. However, if we move on to the market volatility table, I've got it sorted by the largest markets in the country, and you can see Atlanta has a moderate decrease in their head haul volatility, which is the ratio of outbound loads to inbound loads. You see Elizabeth has a moderate increase, and Dallas a strong increase in their head haul, meaning their outbound growing versus their inbound quite a bit. And you can see their outbound tender rejects in Atlanta has dropped a little bit, 0.28%, but a slight increase of 2.10 in Elizabeth, and a slight increase also in Dallas of 0.57. Moving on to the head haul volatility, Dallas, Memphis, New Orleans, we've got the potential hurricane disruption heading that way right now. Pendleton, Oregon, as we saw in the map, and Toledo, Ohio, we're all seeing strong increases in the head haul volatility, which is causing some outbound tender rejection volatility there. Volatility is still occurring as we move forward and look at the strongest increases in tender rejections. A lot of smaller and medium markets, Milwaukee, Alabama, New Orleans, etc. So look out for that volatility. It is still out there. I'm Mike Vincent. Thanks for watching.
The comprehensive logistics offerings from PowerFleet cover in-cab ELD, fleet management, trailer tracking, cargo monitoring, and tracking other assets such as chassis and intermodal containers. Power up your operations with PowerFleet.
Hello and welcome to your Shipper Econ Update. I'm the lead economist here, Anthony Smith, and just jumping into it, we're going to talk about some of the latest housing trends happening in the U.S. So behind me here in the purple line, I have total housing starts, and within total housing starts, we see that there was a modest increase over the last month through September. And in the green line, we have, of course, here the HPSI, the Home Purchasing Sentiment Index. And if you guys remember from the last time we covered housing, the Home Purchasing Sentiment Index is indicative of how consumers are feeling towards purchasing a home. This is put out by Fannie Mae, and what it covers is a couple different indices within it that shows different impacts of how consumers feel about making a home purchase, whether it's how comfortable they feel about making a purchase, how secure they feel in their jobs, whether right now is a good time to buy or sell, and other major questions that consumers face on a day-to-day basis when thinking about these decisions. And so what we can see is that since mid-March, or since March, there's been a steady uptick for the Home Purchasing Sentiment Index, in addition to the home housing starts within the U.S. And we can see that there was a spike or increase in the green line before there was an increase in the purple line, showing that consumers were feeling optimistic about buying a home, and then shortly thereafter, more homes were being built once again. And so there are a few implications that could be taken away, of course, when we're looking at the Home Purchasing Sentiment Index. But when we get into housing starts, first things first is we have to jump into some of the diverging trends. And some of the diverging trends we see within single-family housing starts was the purple line here, which spiked over the last month, while we see a settled decline or steady decline here in that multifamily unit. And so there is a clear divergent trend between the two. When we're looking at overall housing starts, the purple line, single-family starts, is going to make up the much more larger majority of overall housing transactions for new homes, while multifamily units are going to make up a smaller portion. Both are important, but they're going to vary on a region-to-region basis. And when we're looking at housing starts overall, of course, the implications are how consumers are feeling towards homes, but this also leads into freight when these homes are being built. Flatbed volumes can really be impacted by building materials being hauled throughout the country. And that's one of the other things we're going to jump into here shortly is how these, what are some of the downstream impacts for new home sales. And so, as you all know, when consumers usually feel more confident about buying houses or other things like that, they're feeling confident about making these big ticket purchases. And so these big ticket purchases are indicative of other aspects of the housing market as well. And as we can see here, and the green line with housing starts rising or staying in a more positive light, we can see that this purple line, retail sales of furniture and related products, is also remaining pretty steady up there as well. So we can see that there's a downstream effect when we're looking at housing starts. Consumers feel more confident about filling those homes with new appliances. And so this also feeds into freight volumes. And so one of the things that's really impacting consumers right now, of course, is the latest employment conditions. And what we can see for the latest number from the initial jobless claims is that this number fell below 800 for the first time since mid-March. And so we are now sitting at 787,000 initial jobless claims, which is still an insane high amount, but this is coming down nonetheless. So this is good news for overall jobless claims. This week, we did see an inclusion of California, because before this, California was excluded because they were working through many fraud attempts and backlogs of claims coming through. So what we can see is that there is a resuming of downward movement for jobless claims, but it's still very high. Consumers are feeling confident right now when we're looking at overall housing market conditions, and that's going to lead into many downstream effects for retail sales and more freight volumes. And that's going to do for this Econ Shipper Update. As always, you can check out all of our content on FreightWaves TV's apps on all your favorite streaming platforms. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode.